Everyone mistakenly believed Audrey Sterling was broken when she walked away from her marriage empty-handed. She signed the divorce papers without asking for alimony, a house or shares in the company she helped build. Her ex-husband Gavin laughed as she left, convinced he had successfully pulled off the heist of the century. However, he forgot that you should never fear the fighter, but rather the person who stays silent. 6 months later, instead of simply taking the bus to their final hearing, Audrey landed in a Billionaire's private Gulfstream G650, fully ready to burn Gavin's entire world to the ground. But he forgot one thing. You don't fear the person who screams and fights. You fear the person who stays silent. 6 months later, Gavin Sterling was standing in a federal courtroom, confident and smug, waiting to crush her one last time. Then the hearing was interrupted by a roar from the nearby airfield. She didn't take the bus to court that day. She landed in a Gulfstream G650, belonging to the one man Gavin feared most. And she didn't come to negotiate. She came to burn his world to the ground. This is the story of how the woman with nothing ended up with everything. The air in the conference room was so cold it felt artificial, recycled through vents that hadn't seen fresh air in a decade. It smelled of expensive leather stale coffee and the specific metallic scent of arrogance. Audrey sat on one side of the mahogany table, her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing a beige cardigan that had seen better days and a pair of trousers that were slightly too loose. Stress had eaten away 10 pounds in the last month alone. Across from her sat Gavin Sterling. He didn't look like a man ending a 12-year marriage. He looked like a man closing a real estate deal he found slightly boring. He checked his Rolex, the gold Submariner she had bought him for his 40th birthday, and sighed a sharp, impatient sound that echoed in the silence. "Audrey, let's not make this a theatrical production," Gavin said, not even looking at her. He was scrolling through something on his phone. "Mr. Blackwood has explained the terms. It's a clean break. You want out. This is the door." Mr. Blackwood, Gavin's shark of a lawyer, slid a thick document across the table. He offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's a generous offer, Mrs. Sterling, considering the circumstances. You keep the 2018 Honda. You keep your personal effects. Gavin absorbs all the marital debt. In exchange, you waive all rights to spousal support and any claim on Sterling logistics." Marital debt. That was their favorite phrase. Gavin had leveraged their life to the hilt to expand his shipping empire, taking out loans in both their names. Technically, on paper, they were broke. But Audrey knew better. She knew about the shell companies in the Caymans. She knew about the consulting fees paid to phantom employees. She looked at the papers. "And if I don't sign?" Gavin finally looked up. His eyes, once the warm blue she had fallen in love with at a college mixer, were now hard and flat. "Then we go to court, Audrey. I'll bury you in legal fees. I'll drag out the proceedings until you're sleeping in that Honda, and I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly why I'm leaving you. Do you really want me to bring up the incident at the gala last year?" Audrey flinched. The incident was a lie he had carefully cultivated, a rumor that she was an alcoholic, unstable, and prone to outbursts. It wasn't true. She had fainted from exhaustion after organizing his charity event single-handedly while battling the flu, but Gavin had spun the narrative. In their social circle, perception was reality. "No," Audrey whispered. Her voice was hoarse. "I don't want that." "Then sign," Gavin commanded. "Take the freedom and go. Isabel is waiting for me." "Isabel." The 24-year-old PER intern. The one who looked at Gavin like he was a god, not knowing he was a monster who fed on admiration. Audrey picked up the pen. Her hand trembled just once before she steeled herself. She thought about the 12 years. The nights she stayed up rewriting his business proposals because he was too dyslexic to do it himself, but too proud to admit it. The way she had used her own inheritance from her grandmother to bail out his first failing venture. She looked at him. He really thinks I'm stupid, she thought. He thinks I'm just the housewife who arranges the flowers. She lowered the pen to the paper. 0, she said softly. What? Blackwood asked. I leave with 0. Fine. She signed. Rapid, sharp strokes. Audrey Hale. She dropped the sterling immediately. Gavin let out a laugh, a bark of triumph. He snatched the papers away before the ink was even dry. Smart girl. Finally. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. You have until the end of the week to vacate the estate. I'll have security check your bags to make sure you aren't taking any of my silverware. Audrey stood up. She felt light-headed, but strangely unburdened. You don't have to worry, Gavin. I don't want anything that you've touched. She walked out of the office, past the glass walls, past the secretaries who wouldn't meet her eyes. She took the elevator down 40 floors to the lobby and stepped out onto the rainy streets of Seattle. She had exactly $400 in her checking account. She had no job. She had a 10-year gap on her resume. She was 34 years old, and she was starting over from scratch. She walked 2 blocks to where the Honda was parked, racking up a fee she couldn't afford. She sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel. She didn't cry. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry over him ever again. She pulled out her phone. It was an old model. Gavin had the latest iPhone, of course. She dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Hello, a voice answered, sharp and professional. Dean, Audrey asked. There was a pause. Audrey, is that you? My God, I haven't heard from you since the wedding. I know, Dean. I'm sorry. Dean was her old professor from Wharton, the one who had told her she was the brightest financial analyst he'd ever seen, right before she threw it all away to marry Gavin. I need a favor. I need a job. Anything. I'll file papers, I'll get coffee, I need to work. Audrey, you were the top of your class. Dean sighed. But the market is tough right now, especially with a gap like yours. Please. Look. Dean hesitated. I have a contact. It's not glamorous. It's a high-risk portfolio management firm. They chew people up and spit them out. The boss is difficult. Nobody lasts more than 3 months as his personal analyst. I survived Gavin Sterling for 12 years. Audrey said, her eyes watching the rain streak down the windshield. I can handle difficult. The guy's name is Nathaniel Cross, Dean said. I'll send over his office address. Don't be late. And Audrey, good luck. You're going to need it. Nathaniel Cross. The name sent a shiver down her spine. The Dark Prince of Tech. The man who bought failing companies, stripped them for parts, and rebuilt them into empires. He was known to be a recluse, a genius, and utterly ruthless. Audrey started the car. The engine sputtered before catching. Nathaniel Cross, she whispered to the empty car. Let's see what you've got. She didn't know it yet, but she wasn't just driving toward a job. She was driving toward the weapon she would use to kill the past. 2 weeks later, Audrey was running on caffeine and sheer desperation. She had moved into a studio apartment in a neighborhood where the police sirens were a nightly lullaby. The mattress was on the floor, and her dining table was a stack of cardboard boxes. She had spent every waking hour studying Nathaniel Cross. She read every article, every market analysis, or every obscure interview he had given in the last 5 years. She knew his investment patterns better than she knew her own heart. When she arrived at Cross Industries for the interview, she looked different. She had cut her hair into a sharp bob. No more money for expensive salon blowouts, but the severity suited her. She wore a black suit she had found at a thrift store tailored by her own hand to fit perfectly. The receptionist looked her up and down with skepticism. "Mr. Cross is in a meeting. He usually cancels interviews, so don't get comfortable." "I'll wait," Audrey said. She waited for 4 hours. Most people would have left. Audrey sat perfectly still, reading financial reports on her cracked phone screen. She watched the employees scurry back and forth. They looked terrified. The atmosphere here wasn't just high pressure. It was predatory. Finally, the double doors at the end of the hall banged open. A man in a suit ran out, looking like he was about to vomit. He was clutching a box of personal belongings. "You're next," the receptionist said, looking at Audrey with pity. "Good luck. Try not to cry in front of him. He hates that." Audrey walked into the office. It was massive, entirely glass and steel overlooking the bay, but the blinds were drawn, casting the room in shadow. At the far end, behind a desk that looked like it was carved from a single block of obsidian, sat Nathaniel Cross. He didn't look up. He was typing furiously on 3 different monitors. "You're the referral from Dean," he said. His voice was deep gravelly and completely devoid of warmth. "Resume." Audrey placed it on the desk. He glanced at it for exactly 2 seconds. "Wharton. Honors." Then, nothing. Nathaniel said, finally looking at her. He was striking. Not handsome in the way Gavin was. Nathaniel had a scar running through his left eyebrow, and his eyes were dark, intense, and analyzing her like she was a line of code. He hadn't shaved in a few days. He looked exhausted and dangerous. 10 years, he said, tossing the paper back at her. "You were a housewife. What makes you think you can handle my accounts? I deal with billions, Mrs. Hale, not grocery budgets." "It's Ms. Hale," Audrey corrected him, her voice steady. "And I didn't just manage a household. I managed Gavin Sterling." Nathaniel paused. His eyes narrowed. "Sterling Logistics. That house of cards." "It's a house of cards that posted a 40% profit increase last quarter," Audrey said. "Because I restructured his debt consolidation strategy in 2018. I routed his logistics through shell corporations in Panama to avoid tariffs legal, barely, but effective. I found the loopholes in the maritime shipping laws that saved him $3 million a year." Nathaniel stopped typing. He leaned back in his chair. "You did that?" He took the credit. "I did the math." Audrey took a step forward. "I know you're looking at the acquisition of Kincaid Tech. I know you're hesitant because their Q3 numbers look inflated." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "They are inflated," Audrey said. "They're capitalizing their R&D costs to boost current earnings. It's a classic Enron light move. If you buy them at the asking price, you're buying a bomb." "But," she paused, "if you wait 2 weeks, their audit is due. The stock will tank. You can pick them up for pennies on the dollar and strip the patent portfolio, which is the only thing of value they have." Silence stretched in the room. Nathaniel stared at her. For a moment she thought he was going to throw her out. "Dean said you were sharp," Nathaniel murmured. "He didn't say you were ruthless." "I have nothing left to lose, Mr. Cross," Audrey said. "That makes me very dangerous and very useful." Nathaniel picked up a file from his desk and tossed it toward her. It slid across the polished surface and stopped at the edge. That's a forensic audit of a subsidiary in Hong Kong. It's a mess. My current team says it's clean. I think they're lying or incompetent. You have until tomorrow morning to find the leak. And if I find it, then you have a job, trial period, minimum wage for the first month. It was an insult, a billionaire paying minimum wage. But Audrey didn't flinch. I'll have it on your desk by 6 a.m., she said. She grabbed the file. One more thing, Nathaniel said as she turned to leave. She looked back. Why are you here? Ms. Hale, a woman with your talent could go to a nice, safe bank. Why come to the wolf's den? Audrey tightened her grip on the file. Because I need to learn how to hunt. Nathaniel's lips quirked up in the faintest ghost of a smile. Get out of my office. Audrey walked out. She worked all night. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. By 4 a.m., she found it a discrepancy of 50,000 buried in shipping manifests, repeated thousands of times. It was a skimming operation worth millions. She placed the report on his desk at 5:55 a.m. When Nathaniel walked in at 8 a.m., he read it. He called his head of security immediately. Fire the entire Hong Kong accounting team and get Audrey Hale an office, the one next to mine. Audrey had her foot in the door. Now she just had to survive the climb. 3 months bled into the past, marked not by days on a calendar, but by the rise and fall of stock indices. Audrey had ceased to be the woman who drove a Honda and apologized for taking up space. Under Nathaniel Cross's brutal tutelage, she had been forged into something sharper, colder, and infinitely more efficient. She was no longer just an analyst. She was Nathaniel's shadow. She sat in on board meetings, her silence more intimidating than the shouting of the directors. She anticipated Nathaniel's needs before he vocalized them, a coffee placed on his desk at 2 p.m., a dossier on a rival CEO, prepared before he even asked for the background check. They had a rhythm. It wasn't friendly. Nathaniel didn't do friends, but it was a seamless, high-velocity partnership. Tonight, Nathaniel said, not looking up from his tablet as they rode the private elevator down to the garage. The Vanguard Summit. You're coming with me. Audrey froze. The Vanguard Summit was the most exclusive business gathering on the West Coast. It was a Shark Tank in tuxedos. I'm not on the guest list, Nathaniel, and I definitely don't have anything to wear to an event like that. You are on the list because I put you there, Nathaniel said, stepping out as the doors opened. His driver held the door of the black Maybach open. And as for the dress check, your office, if you're going to stand next to me, you need to look like you own the room, not like you're cleaning it. Audrey went back up to her office. On her desk sat a large black box tied with a silver ribbon. Inside was a dress that cost more than her ex-husband's car. It was midnight blue velvet, sleek architectural, and devastatingly elegant. It came with diamond studs, small but real. She touched the fabric. For 12 years, Gavin had critiqued her style. Too frumpy, too revealing, too plain. He treated her like a doll he couldn't quite accessorize correctly. Nathaniel hadn't asked her or her preference. He had simply assessed the asset and optimized it. 2 hours later, Audrey walked into the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel. The room was a sea of black ties and designer gowns buzzing with the hum of billions of dollars changing hands in hushed conversations. She walked beside Nathaniel. He wore a tuxedo with the ease of a man who wore armor every day. As they moved through the crowd, the sea parted. People feared Nathaniel Cross. They whispered as he passed. "Chin up," Nathaniel murmured to her, his voice a low rumble only she could hear. You're the smartest person in this room. Act like it. Audrey straightened her spine, and then she saw him. Gavin. He was standing near the Champagne Tower, holding court with a group of sycophants. Isabel was hanging off his arm, looking bored and scrolling on her phone, wearing a dress that was sparkly but ill-fitting. Gavin looked tired. His laugh was too loud, his gestures too wide. He turned glass in hand, and his eyes swept over the room. They landed on Nathaniel. Envy flashed across his face, and then they slid to the woman beside him. Gavin dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, champagne splashing onto Isabel's shoes. "What the hell?" Isabel shrieked. Gavin ignored her. He stared at Audrey. He didn't recognize her at first. The sharp bob, the terrifyingly expensive dress, the cold confidence in her eyes. But then the realization hit him like a physical blow. He marched over his face, flushing red. "Audrey," he hissed, stepping into their path. "What are you doing here? Did you sneak in? Are you catering?" Nathaniel stopped. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. Audrey looked at her ex-husband. For the first time in years, she felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no love, no regret, just a mild distaste like looking at a stain on a rug. "Hello, Gavin," she said smoothly. "I'm here on business." "Business?" Gavin laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "What business? You haven't worked a day in a decade. Who are you sleeping with to get in here?" The silence that followed was deafening. People nearby stopped talking. Isabel arrived, looking from Audrey to Gavin, confused. Nathaniel took half a step forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Mr. Sterling," Nathaniel said. His tone was conversational, which made it terrifying. "I suggest you apologize to my Associate Director of Strategic Acquisitions before I decide to buy your debt and call it in by tomorrow morning." Gavin paled. He looked from Nathaniel to Audrey. She works for you." "She advises me," Nathaniel corrected, "which means she decides who I eat for lunch. And right now, she's looking very hungry." Gavin swallowed hard. He looked at Audrey, searching for the submissive wife who would smooth this over, who would apologize for the scene. He found a stranger. Gavin stammered. "I didn't know." "There's a lot you don't know, Gavin," Audrey said softly. "Enjoy the party. I hear the shrimp is excellent." She turned her back on him. "Shall we, Mr. Cross?" Nathaniel offered his arm. It was a breach of protocol. He never touched employees, but tonight was theater. She took it. As they walked away, leaving a stunned Gavin in their wake, Nathaniel leaned down. "Nice touch with the shrimp comment," he whispered. "Ruthless." "I learned from the best," Audrey replied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Don't get cocky, Hale," Nathaniel said, though his eyes were gleaming with something that looked suspiciously like pride. "The night is young, and I need you to charm the Japanese delegation. They're thinking of pulling out of the solar deal." "Consider it done," Audrey said. For the rest of the night, she was electric. She spoke fluent French to the European investors, a skill Gavin had mocked as useless. She navigated complex tax discussions, and she secured the Japanese deal with a bow and a smile. Nathaniel watched her from across the room, swirling his scotch. He wasn't just impressed. He was intrigued. He had hired a calculator. He had discovered a weapon. But weapons, he knew, had a way of attracting wars. The high from the gala lasted exactly 48 hours. Then reality crashed back in. Audrey was deep in the archives of Cross Industries, analyzing a potential merger with a shipping conglomerate called Trident Maritime. Nathaniel wanted to acquire Trident to handle his hardware distribution. It was a massive deal, worth nearly $2 billion. Audrey was cross-referencing Trident's vendor list when she saw it. A recurring payment to a company called Nexus Logistics. The name was generic boring, but the address was a P.O. box in Nevada. Audrey frowned. She knew that P.O. box. She had paid the rental fee for it 3 years ago, when Gavin said he needed a private mailing address for surprise gifts. Her heart skipped a beat. She pulled the thread. Nexus Logistics wasn't a logistics company. It was a shell, and it was billing Trident Maritime for consulting services at a rate of $200,000 a month. Audrey typed furiously, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She hacked into the metadata of the invoices, a trick the IT head, a teenager named Silas, had taught her over donuts. The invoices were authorized by Trident's COO, a man named Marcus Vane. Marcus Vane was Gavin's fraternity brother. The picture formed in her mind, ugly and clear. Gavin and Marcus were siphoning money out of Trident before the sale to Nathaniel. They were inflating Trident's operating costs, pocketing the cash through the Nexus shell company. If Nathaniel bought Trident, he would be buying a company that was bleeding cash, and Gavin would walk away with millions of Nathaniel's money, effectively laundered through the acquisition price. "You son of a bitch," Audrey whispered. She didn't wait. She printed the documents. She walked straight into Nathaniel's office, bypassing his assistant. Nathaniel was on a call. He looked annoyed at the intrusion, but when he saw her face pale, determined, furious, he hung up without a word. "What is it?" Audrey slammed the file onto his desk. "Don't buy Trident." "The deal closes in 3 days, Audrey. We're in the final stages." "It's a trap," she said. "Gavin Sterling is skimming off the top. He's in bed with Trident's COO. They're inflating the valuation. If you buy it, you're handing my ex-husband a $10 million golden parachute, and you'll be left with a company that has a hole in its balance sheet the size of Texas." Nathaniel picked up the file. He read it in silence. His face turned to stone. The air in the room grew heavy. "He's stealing from me," Nathaniel said quietly. It wasn't a question. Indirectly. But yes. Nathaniel looked at her. "You just saved me $2 billion. "I just stopped Gavin from winning," Audrey said. "That's all I care about." "Cancel the deal." Nathaniel ordered his intercom. "And release a press statement. We're pulling out due to financial irregularities. Leaks to the Wall Street Journal." The news hit the market the next morning. Trident's stock plummeted. The deal collapsed. Gavin's golden parachute evaporated instantly. But Audrey had underestimated a desperate man. 2 days later, she was preparing for a business trip. Nathaniel needed her in London to close a clean energy deal, a week-long trip that would solidify her position as his second-in-command. She was packing her suitcase in her small apartment when a knock came at the door. It wasn't room service. It was a process server. "Audrey Hale?" "Yes." He handed her a thick envelope. "You've been served." Audrey tore it open. Her knees buckled. Superior Court of Washington. Plaintiff Sterling Logistics and Gavin Sterling. Defendant Audrey Hale. Charges: breach of non-disclosure agreement, theft of trade secrets, corporate espionage. Gavin was suing her. She read the frantic legal jargon. He was claiming that she had stolen proprietary client lists when she left the marriage and used them to get her job at Cross Industries. He was claiming her insights into Trident were based on stolen confidential marital conversations. It was a lie, all of it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the emergency injunction. The plaintiff requests an immediate restraining order, preventing the defendant from engaging in any financial consulting activities pending the outcome of this trial. The plaintiff further requests the seizure of all electronic devices and travel documents to prevent flight. And the hearing was set for Friday at 9:00 a.m. Today was Wednesday. Her flight to London with Nathaniel was Thursday morning. If she went to London, she would miss the hearing. A default judgment would be entered against her. She would be branded a thief and a spy. Her career would be over. Nathaniel would have to fire her to protect his company's reputation. But if she stayed for the hearing, she missed the London deal, the biggest opportunity of her life. Her phone rang. It was Gavin. She answered, her hand shaking. "Do you like the reading material, Audrey?" Gavin's voice was slurred. He was drunk. "It's all lies, Gavin. Perjury." "It's leverage," Gavin sneered. "I know about London. I know you're the golden girl over at Cross now. But you can't go to London if your passport is flagged by a court order. Can you? What do you want?" "I want you to quit," Gavin hissed. "I want you to resign from Cross Industries, publicly. Admit you're incompetent, and then I'll drop the lawsuit. If you don't, I'll drag this out for years. I'll ruin your name. You'll never work in this town again." Audrey hung up. She sank to the floor. She had to tell Nathaniel. She walked into his office an hour later, the summons in her hand. She felt like she was walking to the gallows. She explained it all. The lies, the trap, the choice. Nathaniel listened, leaning back in his chair, his face unreadable. When she finished, he stared out the window at the grey Seattle skyline. "So," he said, "if you go to London, you lose the lawsuit and your reputation. If you stay, you miss the deal." "I have to stay," Audrey said, her voice breaking. "I have to fight this, but I can't be your associate director if I'm tied up in court for months. You need someone in London." She took a breath. "I'm resigning, Nathaniel. It's the only way to keep the company clean." Nathaniel spun his chair around. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw true anger in his eyes. Not at her, but for her. "You think I care about a nuisance lawsuit from a bankrupt shipping heir?" Nathaniel asked. "He has a judge in his pocket, Nathaniel. He moved the hearing up. He's trying to ground me." Nathaniel stood up. He walked over to her. He was closer than he had ever been. She could smell his cologne sandalwood and rain. "Pack your bags, Audrey," he said. "What I can't. The hearing. You are going to London," Nathaniel said firmly. "You're going to close that deal. You're going to make me $100 million. But the court date is Friday, if I'm not there." Nathaniel checked his watch. "The hearing is Friday at 9:00 a.m. in Seattle. The signing in London is Thursday at 4:00 p.m. GMT. "That's impossible," Audrey said. "It's an 11-hour flight. Even if we sign at 4 p.m. with the time difference, there's no way to get back. Commercial flights don't fly that fast." Nathaniel smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. Who said anything about commercial? He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Prepare the G650, he commanded, "and tell the pilots to file a flight plan for supersonic speeds over the Atlantic. I don't care about the fines. We have a court date to crash." He looked at Audrey. "Gavin wants a war fine, but he brought a knife. I'm bringing a nuke." London was weeping grey rain when the Gulfstream G650 touched down at Luton Airport. They didn't go to a hotel. There was no time. A convoy of black Range Rovers was waiting on the tarmac engines, idling exhaust pluming into the cold air. Audrey sat in the back of the lead car, next to Nathaniel. She had reviewed the contracts on the flight over until the words blurred into meaningless shapes. She was running on adrenaline and a double shot of espresso. Sir Alistair Sterling, no relation to your ex, is old school. Nathaniel briefed her as the car tore down the M1 toward the city centre. He doesn't believe in renewable energy, and he certainly doesn't believe in women at the negotiating table. He's selling his solar division because he thinks it's a dead asset. We need that division to corner the European market. He thinks it's a yard sale, Audrey said, adjusting her collar. We need to make him think he's robbing us while we actually rob him. Exactly. The meeting is set for 8:00 p.m. We have exactly 12 hours before we need to be wheels up to make it back for your hearing. And if negotiations drag on, they won't. Nathaniel set his eyes hard. Because you won't let them. The meeting took place in a private club in Mayfair, a place with oak-panelled walls and a strict dress code that required Audrey to wear a blazer over her dress. Sir Alistair was a man of 60, red-faced and boisterous, surrounded by a team of lawyers who looked like undertakers. Mr. Cross, Alistair boomed, ignoring Audrey completely. You've travelled a long way for a portfolio of glass panels. I like glass, Nathaniel said, taking a seat. It's transparent, unlike some business models. He gestured to Audrey. My associate director, Ms. Hale, will lead the valuation discussion. Alistair raised a bushy eyebrow. A woman. For a valuation of this magnitude, Mr. Cross, surely we can speak man to man. Audrey didn't wait for Nathaniel to defend her. She opened her leather folio. Sir Alistair, she began, her voice crisp and authoritative. Your solar division Helios has been bleeding capital for 5 years, not because the tech is bad, but because your grid integration in the North Sea is flawed. You're losing 15% of your energy in transmission. Alistair scoffed. Technical hiccups. Structural failure, Audrey corrected. I've analysed your maintenance logs. You have a choice. You can sell to us at the valuation I've prepared, or you can keep the asset. But if you keep it, you'll face a regulatory fine from the EU Environmental Commission next month for inefficient storage practices. A fine that I estimate will be roughly £40 million. The room went silent. Alistair's smile vanished. How do you know about the Commission's inquiry? I read, Audrey said simply. I've offered you a fair price. It includes a premium that covers your debt. But this offer expires when I walk out that door. The negotiation that followed was a bloodbath. Alistair fought for every penny. He blustered, he threatened, he stalled. The hours ticked by. 9:00 p.m. 11:00 p.m. 1:00 a.m. Audrey didn't waver. She countered every argument with hard data. She was relentless. But inside, she was screaming. Every minute spent here was a minute closer to the hearing in Seattle. By 3:00 a.m. London time, they were deadlocked over a patent clause. I won't sign over the battery tech. Alistair slammed his hand on the table. It's the crown jewel. It's useless without the grid infrastructure we're building, Audrey shot back. Without us, it's just a very expensive paperweight. Nathaniel checked his watch. He looked at Audrey. His eyes said it clearly. We have to go. If they didn't leave in the next hour, the physics of the return flight wouldn't work. She would miss court. Gavin would win. Audrey closed the folder. She stood up. Where are you going? Alistair demanded. To the airport, Audrey said coldly. The deal is off. What? Alistair looked stunned. You can't just walk away. I just did. You're too greedy, Sir Alistair, and I don't have time for greed. I have a plane to catch. She turned and began to walk toward the heavy oak doors. It was a gamble, a massive, terrifying bluff. If he let her walk, she lost the deal and her job. 1 step, 2 steps. She reached for the brass handle. "Wait!" Alistair shouted. Audrey paused her hand on the latch. She turned slowly. "Fine." Alistair grunted, looking defeated. "Take the damn batteries. Give me the pen." Audrey walked back to the table. She didn't smile. She slid the contract over. Alistair signed. "A pleasure doing business," she said. They practically ran to the car. That, Nathaniel said as they dove into the back seat of the Rover, was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. "You were going to leave?" "I had to," Audrey said, checking her phone. It was 4:15 a.m. London time. "Driver," Nathaniel barked. "Get us to Luton, fast." They had signed the deal of the decade. Now they had to outrun the sun. The G650 screamed down the runway, rotating into the dark London sky at 4:55 a.m. Audrey collapsed into the leather seat. She calculated the time difference in her head, her mind a frantic abacus. London is 8 hours ahead of Seattle. It was 5:00 a.m. Friday in London. That meant it was 9:00 p.m. Thursday in Seattle. The hearing was at 9:00 a.m. Friday Seattle time. That meant they had 12 hours until court started. "We have plenty of time," Audrey said, exhaling a breath she felt she'd been holding for days. "A 9-hour flight puts us in at 6:00 a.m. Seattle time. That gives me 3 hours to spare." Nathaniel was pouring 2 glasses of scotch. He handed her one. "Don't celebrate yet. We have a headwind over the Atlantic. The pilot says it's going to slow us down. How much? It's going to be tight." Audrey took the drink. Her hands were steady now. The deal was done. She was a woman who had just negotiated a $1 billion merger. Gavin felt small now, insignificant. But Gavin was still dangerous. Halfway over the Atlantic, the Wi-Fi connected. Audrey's phone flooded with notifications, missed calls from her lawyer, texts from a Gavin. Gavin. "Hope the weather in London is nice. My lawyer just filed a motion to move the hearing to 8:30 a.m. Judge accepted. See you there, or not." Audrey dropped the phone. "He moved it up. 30 minutes. Nathaniel frowned. 8:30. "That cuts our margin to 0. He hit the intercom button. "Captain, I need everything this bird has. Redline the engines if you have to. We need to be on the ground in Seattle by 8:00 a.m. at the latest." "Mr. Cross," the pilot's voice crackled. "We're fighting a 100-knot jet stream. I'm pushing Mach 0.92, but we're burning fuel fast. We might need to divert to Bangor for gas." "No diversion," Nathaniel ordered. "We land in Seattle on fumes if we have to. Just to get us there." The cabin fell silent. The hum of the engines was a constant reminder of the speed at which they were hurting through the stratosphere. Audrey went to the small changing room at the back of the jet. She washed her face, scrubbing away the grime of London and the fatigue of the last 24 hours. She looked at herself in the mirror. She wasn't the victim anymore. She wasn't the scorned wife. She opened the garment bag Nathaniel had brought on board. It wasn't a business suit. It was a statement. It was a white suit. Stark, pristine white. Sharp shoulders, wide-legged trousers tailored to within an inch of its life. It was the color of innocence, but cut like armor. She put it on. She applied red lipstick war paint. When she stepped back into the main cabin, Nathaniel stopped typing. He looked at her for a long moment. "You look like you're going to a coronation," he said. "I'm going to an execution," Audrey replied. His. "We're beginning our descent," the pilot announced. "It's going to be bumpy." They hit the turbulence over the Rockies. The plane shook violently. Audrey gripped the armrest. "We're going to be late," she whispered, watching the flight map. The ETA read 8:15 a.m. "Boeing Field is closer to the courthouse than SeaTac," Nathaniel said. "I have a helicopter on standby at the airfield. We bypass traffic." "A helicopter? I told you, Audrey. I brought a nuke." The plane touched down at King County International Airport at 8:18 a.m. The wheels shrieked against the tarmac. The moment the stairs lowered, the roar of a rotor blade drowned out everything. A sleek black helicopter was waiting on the tarmac, blades spinning. They ran. Audrey in her white suit, Nathaniel right behind her, carrying her files. They ducked under the rotors and scrambled inside. "County courthouse," Nathaniel yelled into the headset. "Put us on the roof." "We can't land on the roof, sir. It's a government building," the pilot argued. "Then land in the park across the street. I'll pay the fine." The helicopter surged up. Seattle sprawled beneath them, grey and wet. They flew over the gridlock of I-5, the cars looking like toys stuck in mud. 8:25 a.m. 8:28 a.m. "There," Nathaniel pointed. The courthouse was a grey monolith in the center of the city. The pilot banked hard, dropping altitude rapidly. He hovered over the grassy plaza in front of the court. People scattered. Sirens wailed in the distance. "Go!" Nathaniel shouted as the skids touched the grass. Audrey jumped out. The wind from the rotors whipped her hair, but she didn't care. She clutched the files to her chest. "Go get him!" Nathaniel yelled over the noise. He stayed in the chopper, watching her run. She sprinted across the wet grass up the marble steps. 8:29 a.m. She burst through the security checkpoint. "Audrey Hale," she shouted at the guard, flashing her ID. "I'm the defendant in courtroom 4B. The guard, stunned by the woman in the white suit who had just fallen out of the sky, waved her through. She kicked off her heels. She ran barefoot down the hallway, the marble cold against her skin. She reached the double doors of courtroom 4B. Inside, Gavin was standing. His lawyer was smiling. "Your Honor," Gavin's lawyer was saying, "it appears the defendant has fled the jurisdiction. We ask for a default judgment in the amount of $5 million and an immediate injunction." Audrey slammed the doors open with both hands. The bang echoed like a gunshot. Every head turned. Gavin froze. Audrey stood there, chest heaving, holding her shoes in one hand and the London contracts in the other. The white suit was spotless. She looked like an avenging angel. "I object," she gasped, striding down the aisle. She dropped her shoes and stepped into them without breaking stride. "Mrs. Sterling?" the judge asked, peering over his glasses. "Ms. Hale." Audrey corrected, her voice ringing out strong. "And I haven't fled anything. I was just in London closing $1 billion merger for Cross Industries, and now I'm here to close this case." She slammed the files onto the defense table. She looked at Gavin. His smugness was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. "Shall we begin?" Audrey smiled. The courtroom was silent enough to hear a pin drop. The judge looked from Audrey standing tall in her white suit to Gavin, who was sweating through his collar. "Ms. Hale," the judge said, adjusting his glasses, "you are cutting it very close. Plaintiff's counsel was about to file for a default judgment." "I apologize, Your Honor," Audrey said, her voice steady and clear. "My flight from London encountered headwinds, but I believe the evidence I have brought with me is worth the delay." Gavin's lawyer stood up. "Objection. What evidence? This is a hearing about her theft of trade secrets." "Actually," Audrey said, turning to face the gallery, then back to the judge. It's a hearing about intellectual property, and I would like to submit Exhibit A. She slid the folder she had carried from the helicopter across the bench. Mr. Sterling claims I stole his client list to secure my position at Cross Industries. He claims I am incompetent and relied on his proprietary data. However, Audrey pulled out a second document. This is an affidavit from Nathaniel Cross, CEO of Cross Industries, time-stamped 3 hours ago in London. It confirms that my employment was contingent solely on my forensic audit of Trident Maritime. Gavin flinched at the name Trident. Trident Maritime? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. Audrey continued, locking eyes with Gavin. The company Mr. Sterling was attempting to sell to my employer. During my due diligence, the very work he claims I am unqualified to do, I discovered a shell company called Nexus Logistics. Gavin leaped to his feet. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, the judge barked. He looked at Audrey. Go on. Nexus Logistics has been billing Trident for consulting fees. Audrey said, her voice rising with the momentum of victory. Fees that were deposited into a private account in Nevada, an account linked to a P.O. box registered to Gavin Sterling. She dropped the final piece of paper on the table. It was a copy of the P.O. box registration she had dug up weeks ago. I didn't steal his secrets, Your Honor, Audrey said softly. I discovered his fraud. This lawsuit isn't about protecting his company. It's about silencing a whistleblower. He sued me to keep me grounded, to keep me from closing the deal in London, and to bankrupt me before I could expose him to the SEC. The judge picked up the papers. He read them slowly, his eyebrows knit together. He looked at Gavin, whose face had gone a sickly shade of grey. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Is this true? Are you using this court as a weapon to cover up corporate embezzlement? No, she's lying. Gavin stammered, looking at his lawyer for help. But his lawyer was already packing his briefcase, inching away from him. The case against Ms. Hale is dismissed with prejudice. The judge slammed his gavel. Furthermore, I am referring this evidence to the district attorney's office for immediate investigation into fraud and perjury. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. Sterling does not leave the building. The gavel bang echoed like a cannon shot. Audrey let out a breath. Her legs felt weak, but she didn't collapse. She turned around. Gavin was slumped in his chair, head in his hands. He looked up at her as she gathered her things. Audrey, he whispered. Please, I'll lose everything. Audrey paused. She looked at the man who had told her she was nothing, the man who had discarded her. You didn't lose everything, Gavin, she said, her voice devoid of malice, just cold truth. You gave it away. You just didn't realize who you were giving it to. She walked out of the courtroom. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the Seattle clouds, blindingly bright. Standing by the helicopter, leaning against the skids with his arms crossed, was Nathaniel Cross. He was still wearing his tuxedo from the night before, tie undone, looking like a weary king. He watched her walk down the steps. Well, he asked. Dismissed with prejudice, Audrey said. And the DA is looking into him. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Good. Now about that London deal. Signed, Audrey said. We own the solar grid. I know, Nathaniel smirked. I saw the stock ticker on the flight over. We're up 12%. He pushed off the helicopter and walked toward her. He stopped a foot away. For a man who never let anyone in, he was standing very close. You jumped out of a helicopter in a white suit, Nathaniel said, looking her up and down. And you destroyed your enemy, in under 10 minutes. I had a good teacher, Audrey replied. You're not an analyst anymore, Audrey, Nathaniel said. I'm promoting you. Partner. Partner. Audrey raised an eyebrow. That sounds expensive. It is. Nathaniel extended his hand. But you're worth it. Audrey took his hand. It was warm and solid. She looked back at the courthouse one last time, then up at the sky. She wasn't the woman who signed the divorce papers with shaking hands anymore. She was Audrey Hale, partner of Cross Industries. Let's go to work, she said. They turned and walked toward the waiting car, leaving the wreckage of the past behind them, ready to build an empire. And that is how Audrey Hale went from signing divorce papers with $0 to her name to becoming a partner in $1 billion empire. She didn't just survive the divorce, she leveled up. Gavin thought he could bury her, but he forgot, too, that she was a seed. What did you think of that courtroom twist? Did Gavin get what he deserved, or was the karma too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, success, and billionaire justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We post new dramas every week. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is massive success. See you in the next video.